We've got Chris. How do you pronounce your last name, Chris? Groshong?
That was good. It's Groshong.
Groshong, okay. And Chris, I'm not familiar with what you do. You want to say a few words about it?
I've started a consulting business in the Bitcoin space, trying to drive merchant adoption, but I've also recently found that there's a real need for business-to-business marketing. So we're kind of doing both right now.
Great. Okay, so you're definitely relevant for this panel. And next up, we've got Susan Poole. And Susan, as I understand it, you're like in the Las Vegas Bitcoin scene. You're very active with getting Bitcoin adoption going around here. Yeah?
So I live in Vegas. My name's Susan Poole. I'm Bitcoin Susan on Twitter. Thought there'd be like Bitcoin Susan 495, but I guess didn't really take off like I thought, so there's just one. And I live here in Vegas. I work closely with Julian in the back room, who sets up a lot of the merchants here in Vegas. And also I work for the Chamber of Digital Commerce, which is the trade association for businesses in the Bitcoin industry out of D.C.
Cool. And last up, we got Joseph Castillo. And Joseph, what do you do? Tell me a little more about that.
So I'm the CEO of Elk Gold. What we do is we're an online retailer of gold and silver. We specialize in Bitcoin to gold transactions, and we're unique in the fact that we do both sides. So we do Bitcoin to gold, gold to Bitcoin.
Cool. And MK, did you want to say anything more about what you do? I know you've got a lot more going on than just working at Airbits, but tell me a little bit more about yourself, because I don't want you to be left out.
Thank you. I'm the community manager at Airbits. I'm also known for my work on the Bitcoin group and Bitcoin Not Bombs, and I've written for Bitcoin Magazine and a few other publications too. So, totally obsessed. And Freedom Fiends, but not so much anymore. But yes, I'm also known for Freedom Fiends.
Yeah, so we've got a bunch of active activists up here. So I'm really excited to talk to you all about this. Okay, so since the title of this panel is Challenges and Opportunities for Bitcoin Businesses and Users, perhaps you could each just talk a little bit from your own perspective. Let's just start with Bitcoin users. And what are the biggest challenges and opportunities for Bitcoin users?
Well, thankfully, Bitcoin is getting a lot easier to use now. There are a lot of apps that make it very easy to get people set up with Bitcoin, that you don't have to spend a whole lot of time educating them about other security measures that they need to take. I found myself getting frustrated when I first started with Bitcoin. I was obsessed with it, and I really saw the potential, but it was so difficult talking to people, about it. First of all, just getting them to understand that it's a currency and a protocol, and all of the various tech stuff behind it, but also showing them how to use it and making sure that they kept their Bitcoin secure. So, when I would set someone up with Bitcoin, I would want to take a lot of time to educate them, not just about Bitcoin and getting them set up with a wallet and giving them Bitcoin, but also making sure that, for instance, their email accounts were secure and things like that. And that's pretty intimidating for people. I mean, just talking about Bitcoin in general, I would kind of tailor it depending on, what business they were involved in or what their interests were, because there's so many aspects to it. But even with that, it can be a little bit overwhelming. A lot of people are familiar with using technology, but they don't want to think about how it works. Same as with credit cards. Like, everyone uses credit cards. No one really thinks about how a credit card works. And I think it's kind of the same with Bitcoin. When you start going into kind of a deeper technical analysis, it can be very intimidating for people. But thankfully, we've seen in the last year just huge improvements as far as usability. So I think that's going to continue, and I think it's just a matter of time before we see a lot more people jumping on board, because they realize that it can be so easy to use.
Cool. Why don't we go to Susan next to talk about users, and then, of course, merchants are users too, so we'll have Chris and Joseph weigh in on that. So, Susan, how about your experience talking with average users about Bitcoin?
Sure. So, the friends and family and Facebook friends and everything, so they're all curious at first. I would talk about Bitcoin, and they didn't really get it. I've had people ask me on LinkedIn. They heard I worked for Bitcoin, and is Bitcoin hiring? Do I have any influence with the Bitcoin company? I've had people tell me, I know people that work at Bitcoin. It's just very funny. Julian and I have had some funny experiences here in Vegas. So we're nice. We don't overcorrect. We educate. So there's that. People get curious over time, but I thought something that Nick Szabo said really, really resonated with me today. And that's his little case study about how PayPal went after a group of users on eBay in a community, a small business community, to garner support. And in that type of model, those users could engage together and use PayPal. And evidently, from what I know of it, what he said, it grew from there. It really got me thinking about that type of use case or that type of bubbling up of a group. And, is anyone doing that in Bitcoin? And if anyone's not, can we do it as individuals? And it really got me thinking, that was only like a half hour ago, really got me thinking of groups and things like that. So it just
do you have any
spark
groups
in me.
in mind?
I actually know of a group. It's a little early on that Julian and I are familiar with. And we are actually looking at a group that would pertain to the Bitcoin community and is currently utilized this type of service by the Bitcoin community that has the potential to be one of those groups. So the timing was great. It was great to hear that from Nick. Stay tuned.
Okay, cool. And MK, do you have any groups that you can think of that are, prime targets for Bitcoin? Anybody specific, or are you just kind of reaching out to whoever?
I think it's great for activists. I've done presentations on this before, but also artists. I would like to see kind of more outreach to art communities or people who work in industries like cash-only industries, or they're maybe trying to make money on the side, doing side jobs, or they're small business owners, things like that. So that's who I kind of would like to see more focus on.
Cool. Okay. So, Chris, you're sort of at the interface between average Joe users and merchants, because you're doing consulting and you're going to help businesses get set up with Bitcoin. And of course, like we said before, merchants are users too, and they need to be educated about how to use Bitcoin if they want to accept it at their business. So tell me a little bit about what strategies do you use to help people to solve people's problems, because that's what a consultant does.
Yeah, so I feel like you can't really talk about one or the other without, it's a chicken and egg scenario, right? There's this conundrum of this circular nature of, well, who do we go after first, users or merchants, right? And honestly, I feel personally that there's not enough of an incentive for for people to go out and sign up merchants, because processors aren't properly incentivizing. And I think their models are wrong.
What do you mean by that? I'm curious to hear more.
Well, you offer 0% up to $1 million in a month. Small merchants are never going to hit that. And if you're not charging any money and you're processing all these transactions, you're basically offering your services for free. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And if you really, and what I think the problem is they're not helping to build a community. And I think by properly incentivizing that, you're helping to build a community. And that's the other part of the users, right? So it's completing the full circle, and I think that starts with a way for people to be able to support themselves and be evangelical at the same time.
So you would look to the payment processors to be more active leaders in educating merchants about how to get on board, and also bringing users on to create a vibrant Bitcoin ecosystem?
Yeah, and I'm actually saying they don't even have to come up with the solutions for that. Like Coinstructive, the business that I've started as the CEO, we are going to be building the educational models and the things that help easily explain Bitcoin to people on a fundamental level and relate it to incremental technologies that have already been established. Because what we're really talking about, I think, is fear. And people are afraid of what they don't understand. Governments are afraid of what they don't understand, and that's why they overregulate things, because they don't understand. So when you have this fear you need to overcome that. And I think educating people gives them the power to not be afraid anymore. Because when you see how simple it is, like your demonstration earlier with Brian, it's just simple. And you realize that the public and private keys and math and all these explanations, you're getting a lot of these technical explanations from people who have it at a high level understanding, and they're not able to, let's say, dumb it down for people like me. And so I have to learn it myself before I can then repeat it to somebody else. And the other thing is you can't just explain something by using the same words over and over again by changing the speed at which you talk to them or how loud you talk and how fast. You have to reiterate it in a totally different way because not all of our brains work the same way, right? And that's why a lot of times the public schools fail too. But that's a whole nother. So I think really it gets down to educating, and marketing is a part of education. And so there's these businesses that have products, but they're still developing these products, and they need to be able to continue to do that. And they have limited funding. They can't develop a full marketing team to go out and do that, or a sales team. So we can become an extension of that, right? And at the same time, we're building the community. So it's beneficial for everybody.
Right on. So, yeah, I have some follow-up questions I want to ask, but first I want to let Joseph weigh in. So you're coming from an interesting perspective because you're seeing all sides of this. You're a Bitcoin user, your clients are Bitcoin users, and you're a merchant. So you're dealing with all these different issues at the same time. Tell me some of the challenges, I guess, that you've had and that your clients have and you see them struggling with.
Sure. So from the customer standpoint, one of the things I'm in a unique position when it comes to Bitcoin people because I'm part of the gold community. So there's an old guard there, and they're interested in Bitcoin, but they don't necessarily know how it works. So there's a lot of education that needs to go into that aspect. But from a merchant standpoint, in 2013, we were one of the first companies to announce that we were abandoning the credit card. And our reason for that was that we're dealing in cash goods, right? So if I send somebody an ounce of gold, they can take that anywhere and get the cash for it. So we had a high risk of chargebacks, and Bitcoin allowed us to move away from credit cards completely. We abandoned them. Not only did we save money from the interest or for the credit card rates on that, but we were able to protect ourselves too. So.
Yeah. So are you primarily like a bricks and mortar business or online or a hybrid?
It's a hybrid. Mostly the San Diego customers get to take advantage of being local, but mostly it's an online retail mailing to customers.
Yeah. So what happened when you abandoned credit cards?
There was a lot of good press, actually. Tony Gillespie from BitPay reached out, and he was really impressed that we did that. It was actually his company that allowed us to do that. So there was good press within the Bitcoin community.
Were you afraid of that at all, going back to this idea of fear? Because, I mean, I would guess that a lot of your business may have been coming from credit cards before.
Right. I had to convince my wife that that was a good idea. I said, well, we're going to save money in one aspect, so the benefits have to. Well, I was betting that the benefits would outweigh the negative effects of it.
Right. So, okay, I have a couple of different questions I'd like to ask, but first I think I'll go more in a direction that ties all this together with the users and merchants, because they're really all the same, like as we were saying before. So why aren't there more businesses that accept Bitcoins? And maybe along the same lines, why aren't there more customers that want to pay with Bitcoin? What do you think is going on there? What's the causality? And what can be done to improve it?
It's what we keep on getting into is it's the education. Still, a lot of people, they haven't dived into Bitcoin. It takes somebody, actually Trace Mayer is the one that introduced me to Bitcoin. And it took a lunch with him where he sat down with his smartphone and showed me how easy it was. And we just did the transaction there. I think, even though people are hearing about Bitcoin on the news or just, random conversations throughout the day, they don't actually have that face-to-face sit down, let's see how easy this transaction works. So that's as that happens, more and more people will be willing to use it, but it's a slow process.
Yeah, Susan, go ahead. You want to weigh in on this?
I think in addition to that, some of the experiences that we've had in Vegas are things like if there's not a payment point-of-sale terminal that's set up to process Bitcoin, then you may have a situation where, like, you're in a retail store and you have an iPad, and the night before, no one plugged the iPad in. So somebody comes in to use Bitcoin and the iPad's not plugged in, and then they're like, well, I guess you don't take Bitcoin. So I think the opportunity is, I think BitPay made an announcement with Ingenico, point-of-sale terminals, and I'm not an expert on it, but I know definitely some of it's I believe in Europe. But I think as the technology becomes more mainstream in the retail and merchant in particular in the retail merchant environment, where it's easier for them with whatever type of technology they're using for credit cards, et cetera, to accept Bitcoin, I think that will take down a barrier to entry, and then it will be easier for more merchants to accept Bitcoin.
Does anyone else want to weigh in on that question? Why aren't there more Bitcoin paying customers and more Bitcoin accepting merchants?
Yeah, so I agree with what the panelists have said so far. A lot of it is people just don't know about Bitcoin, and what they've heard about it, the narratives kind of constructed around it, have to do with, buying drugs on the internet and things like that. And I think they just don't realize how many other merchants are actually taking Bitcoin. So Airbitz has a directory where you can look up all of the people who are taking Bitcoin in your area. And I think that's really useful and really valuable if you're trying to talk a business owner into accepting Bitcoin. You can say, well, these people do it, and it's just fine. A lot of people are a little averse to it. They don't want to add more, systems that require, processing, things like that. And a lot of business owners don't have the time to learn the deep technical stuff either. So, making it as easy to use as possible for them, and then showing that it's not just like this weird niche currency that you can, buy crazy stuff on the internet with, might be helpful.
So I've got a question. Anyone who wants to weigh in on this is welcome. What do y'all think of merchants who get on board with accepting Bitcoin, but do not hold on to the Bitcoin and make it a part of their business? For example, ordering supplies with it or paying their employees with it or whatever. They just immediately turn around and sell it. Are they part of the Bitcoin world, or what are they to you?
Well, I'd have to say that no, they're not really part of the Bitcoin ecosystem. They, they see the benefits of Bitcoin, but they don't have that kind of confidence in it. And I think it takes time to build that confidence. And something that's also helpful when you do onboard a business with Bitcoin, to make sure to support it by going there regularly. I know sometimes we can get really excited to have a merchant start taking Bitcoin, but there's not a follow-up with Bitcoiners going and supporting those businesses. So they need to see that the people who believe in the currency and use it themselves and don't cash it out are using it for those reasons and supporting it. And I would say no. I think that, again, they just need to see the benefits a little more clearly.
Yeah, I know Susan wants to weigh in, but Chris, I'm really curious about you. Would you consider that a win if you got a merchant set up and they just were basically like, yeah, we'll take Bitcoin, but we're going to sell it immediately? Is that a win for you? Is that compatible with your goals?
This is where we're at. Do you think that Coinbase is good? Right? It was the first easy on-ramp to buying, right? We're in the training wheel stage. So you're trying to backfill this incremental, you're trying to backfill technologies so that people feel comfortable with using them. And if you're doing it in a way that is not fully on board with the ideologies behind Bitcoin, I understand where the pure ideologists are wanting it to be, but you just don't flip a switch and everyone's, yep, you're right, this is where we're going to be now. And
maybe they'll come along as they get more experience with it.
Yeah, and I think there's that point where you have to have a momentum to push it, and price is one, but you definitely need people educating. So it all boils down to education again. And Susan, did you have something you wanted to say about this one?
Yeah, I'm pretty passionate about this topic. I can see where utopia would be that someone takes Bitcoin as a merchant and follows it through and purchases everything they can in their entire supply chain and uses it throughout their whole life, I would say that many people that are passionate about ourselves don't do that ourselves. And yet we feel that we're part of the supporting Bitcoin. We use it as much as we can. So I think it's really the nature of where we are. And I fully believe that merchant accepting Bitcoin is part of the ecosystem of where the ecosystem is today. And I believe that there's, the opportunity for what they call the killer apps or the mass adoption, or one big thing could drop on the merchant adoption area through some of the payment processing vendors, or as Ed Moy and some of the other panelists that were up here said, when it becomes there's a better reason or a bigger reason or a more compelling reason for people to accept Bitcoin for their small business or whatever that may be, then that will happen. But I think we're all supportive of people taking Bitcoin, and it's a start. And hopefully the people in this room and everyone watching this can be thinking of those ideas, and we can generate mass adoption through our own business ventures.
And Joseph, what about you? How is Bitcoin integrated with your supply chain or your employees? What about? Yeah, tell me more about that.
Right. So I think that's an example of us winning the battle when a new merchant takes Bitcoin, but not necessarily winning the war, right? So in a perfect world, we would be able to pay all of our distributors with Bitcoin, but that's just not the case yet. It's still in its infancy. So as that comes along, as it becomes possible, it'll be better. But right now, it's just not possible. We still need to convert to USD to pay our distributors, pay our wholesalers. Pay UPS to ship. I mean, most things still run with U.S. dollars. So,
yeah, and I don't know if you want to say, but I'm just curious, about what percentage of your revenue comes in Bitcoin versus U.S. dollars?
It's exclusively Bitcoin.
It's exclusively Bitcoin.
Right.
Okay, great. So yeah, you really do have to contend with not being able to, with being how you're going to pay for all the stuff you need to run your business. Okay, so one last quick and fun question. Let's say you have a budget of $10 million and you have this budget for doing an educational outreach project about Bitcoin. What would you do to teach as many people about how to use Bitcoin as possible? Just give me a creative brainstorming what you would do in this scenario.
So I would get together, people that haven't used Bitcoin before, and just show them how easy it is. Just transact on your phone. Just have essentially it's a meetup, right? And just everybody pass a little bit of Bitcoin to each other, talk about it, and find out how easy it is, and just build on it from there. Tell people how to get it. Do what Airbitz is doing. Show people where they can go to spend. And as that goes, and it's just little by little battles we win, more and more people start accepting Bitcoin, and it grows from there.
So he didn't even use the whole budget.
Okay. I would take the gamers, right? So the youth, the gamers, and I would offer I'd have some brilliant gamer create a crazy game and offer the gamers whatever their gaming tokens are. You can tell them, don't really know too much about it, but whatever they want. And then I would have them win some sort of crazy gamer points by proving that they taught their parents how to use Bitcoin. You get the kids that know what they're doing and all that, and then they're like, "Mom and Dad, look, I'm gonna win something," or "You don't have to pay for the next version of War of the Worlds," or whatever that's called. And because if I teach you to use Bitcoin and you do a transaction or something, then I get that for free or 50% off at GameStop. So something like that. Get the younger ones, get the older ones.
Yeah. All right.
Who's in? Who's got 10 million in there? Okay.
So, the first thing I would do is I would quit my day job and do Bitcoin full time. And the second thing, I would have the education material fully translated into Spanish. And part of the reason is I've been working with BitcoinCuba.org, and we, in July, did the first public transaction, or the first transaction of Bitcoin over the public Wi-Fi in Havana. It was something that just wanted to be proven that it could be done with the Wi-Fi that's available to the people. And there's a huge population in the world that speaks Spanish that doesn't have access to banks. And I think this would be a really great way to do that. And when you're talking, like what Edmund said, you have underdeveloped nations that could really benefit from this. I think you see a lot of those that are in Central and South America. And we see these opportunities, but we also see a lot of similarities within our inner cities that are in underdeveloped nations. And I feel like if you can get into these inner cities and teach the youth also through like YMCA programs or after school programs, that you will be educating, which they may also educate their parents, right? And then you have a system that, or a model that mimics the underdeveloped nations, as well as a model that can drive from the inner cities to the merchants, because they have a lot more influence within their own communities because they're not as advanced. So that's how I would start with my 10 million.
Cool. Bitcoin, big brothers, big sisters. I like it. And how about you, MK?
So I think there are three things I thought of I could do with $10 million. And the first would be decentralized dance parties, because everyone likes to dance and party, and have the top people in Bitcoin have educational seminars for that. That would just be kind of like a fun thing. Second, I would want to have a portion of it delegated to build up infrastructure in underdeveloped nations so that the system can be more easily supported there where it's most needed. And then also I would want to have a huge educational project reaching out to public schools and getting kids educated about this technology, because I think they're able to grasp it really easily. They've grown up using tech, and and I think that it would be easier for them to kind of understand it and jump on. And I really think that focusing on the next generation with Bitcoin would be extremely valuable.
Cool. So I'm hearing learn by doing, make it fun, focus on the kids, and think worldwide. Awesome.
Right.
All right. Well, I think that's a great note to end on, unless we have any questions from the audience. Oh, there's one question. Do we have time, Stephen? Okay. We got one question from the audience.
I was wondering, because we're talking about education, a couple of years ago, especially during the altcoin craze, a lot of countries had the idea to do nationalized airdrops on their alt currencies, which subsequently, because they were valueless and not traded anywhere, were just taken by everyone who was given and immediately exchanged for whatever was worth on Cryptsy or whatever exchange. But if it was Bitcoin, there wouldn't be a dumping process in the same way, and the value wouldn't go down. So what do you guys think about that as a possible alternative?
Airdrops.
I guess I'm not a huge fan of airdrops because I would want a little more follow through. I mean, I would want to make sure that there was more education behind those. It would all depend. I mean, it would all depend on the process of the airdrop and the follow through afterwards.
I don't think I'm really familiar with the airdrop. Is that like?
Oh, it's.
Yeah, like what they were going to do in Dominica. Right, kind of like they did at MIT.
Yeah, so some way of distributing Bitcoin or some cryptocurrency to a wide populace of people. But there's not much follow-up after that, as MK said. Just drop it and leave.
Yeah, so, I mean, if the people don't know what to do with it, right?
So just for the video, the idea is that the commenter
So you're
said,
hoping that they'll do it.
Yeah, the idea is that you give them instructions and the incentive to learn about Bitcoin.
The trustless system.
I think that's interesting. I'm not confident myself that this is the right time for that, and I'll give you an example of why that is. I was at the Consumer Electronics Show working in the Bitcoin area, so BitPay sponsored a pavilion, and other companies were there. And one of the exchanges, I guess, was giving out, had $5 of Bitcoin. Now, everyone in that show had some sort of technology enablement and probably was more than the average person in a airdrop location, a bit more familiar with technology. And I watched as people, $5 in Bitcoin and we'll teach you how to use it. And even people wandering and lollygagging around that asked what it was and what is it didn't take up the offer all the time. So I think the idea is interesting at a point in the future when it's relevant. I think it could drive a fast uptake, a lot of buzz, a lot of media. I don't believe that this is the right time yet, based on my experience at CES.
It seems like it would contribute to the game factor, right? That would be fun to go out and find the Bitcoin, find the GPS location. The only problem that I see with it, I think it would be too focused that everybody that already knows about Bitcoin would be the ones going out and seeking it and playing the game, right? So,
yeah, the commenter is saying you could do it by government IDs or addresses or some other way that might be a little more distributed to everybody. So we got to move on right now. Sorry to the audience members who still had questions. Maybe we can talk after the panel. Thank you so much to the panelists. We had MK Lords, Chris Groshong, Susan Poole, and Joseph Castillo. Thank you so much. And I'm Stephanie Murphy, of course.